Counselor, can you pick up right in the middle of a thought process?
Can I want to back up just for a moment and explain to you how we got to the point that we're at. The original proffer that we came up here with, and the reason I want to have this discussion is because if you don't understand the underlying reasons and we don't agree to them, it's going to be more difficult to get to the end. But when we started, we thought, you know, dollar for dollar payroll credit would be used simply to retire their deliverables obligation, and we would compute it annually. You produce $1 million worth of payroll, the $1 million is reduced from their, whatever the end contribution amount is. As we talked further, we began to focus on, well, what if they don't meet their payroll obligation? Let's suppose it goes below 40. Do we want to throw in the towel and run them out of town, or do we want to create some punitive measure for them to get them to get their payroll back up to where it should be? So we started by saying that if you didn't meet certain numbers of jobs created, we weren't going to give you dollar for dollar reduction of your obligation. We were going to penalize you. That's where the bottom half of this schedule came from. Then as we talked further, we decided, well, if we should disincentivize them for not creating jobs, we should find some reason to incentivize them to create more jobs. That's the basis for why we're where we're at with this schedule. And I kind of want to make sure all of you understand that, so that as we try to reproffer different numbers, we'll all be on the same page. Did I say that correctly, Mr. King?
I think you did, but to Gene's question, the way we kind of left off before the break, I guess, I mean, Gene, I think you can do that. You can create a minimum time frame and then some sort of retroactive deal. The most simple way to do it, I guess, would be if the board thought, if there is some sort of minimum time frame, whether it's 10 years or whatever the board discusses, the question then becomes, if they meet that trigger, is it going to be basically forgiven in whole at that point, or are we going to apply a formula at that point? No matter what circumstance, it's a 10-year trigger, so to speak, and then you go back and look and apply some sort of formula to payroll dollars spent, and it doesn't have to be payroll dollars spent. I mean, it can potentially generate big numbers fairly quickly, as Mike pointed out. But I guess the first threshold question is there some sort of minimum time frame, and then are you going to look back and completely forgive, or are you going to apply a formula that never allows complete 100% forgiveness, or is it going to be scaled like everything up to 100%? So
Well, how many years does this scale?
how many years does this?
Yeah.
Depends on their payroll.
Well, it just depends on their payroll. But I think the thought process, though, Bill, was when we came up with the 10-year term, was that somewhere at the end of 10 years, if they had met their minimum, what was if the minimum, the bottom of the scale down here is 25 jobs, that they were only credited 25% of their payroll. I think the thought process, Donald, was at 10 years, 25 jobs. That generates basically $1 million a year in payroll, 25 jobs at 35 roughly.
Can I do, I'm just been sitting here doing the math. At 40 jobs at 35,000, and that's kind of the minimum number that's been talked about. 5 years, 40 jobs, 35,000 is $7 million. 50 jobs was 8.75, I believe, or 8.5. So when you get to 5 years, even at the kind of low end of what they're talking about, you're kind of you're pretty much getting close to it. my recommendation would be to not necessarily put a time limit on it, but if you just dropped away from anything over 100%, and I know there ought to be an incentive for them to create more jobs, but if they create more jobs, they retire the debt faster.
You're saying basically move 100% up to where the 150 plus is
Right, that's what I think.
and scale it down to zero.
If they, and of course, on the other hand, it does, at 150 jobs, it retires in 2 years. So, you know, maybe that gets back to, you should have a 5-year minimum.
There's got to be years tied to it. Because the possibility, I mean, probably not, but possibility is 3 years, they could have 150 employees and they could skedaddle.
Donald, let me ask you this. I want to go back and focus on dollar for dollar. How do we feel about dollar for dollar payroll credit for their deliverables annually?
You could
Does
always
any-
go
does anyone-
50 cent on the dollar. or-
Does anyone argue with that?
Depending on the time, to me.
No, well,
Yeah, because
but if,
I still don't want them, us, or the $9 million to be satisfied within a short period of time. And we've got 50 to 150 people in this county that's gonna be without a job the next day. That's what bothers me. If they skedaddle, they meet this obligation, they don't owe us any money. They paid it in payroll. Monday morning, the chain's on the door, and they're gone.
What if we did something like to Gene's original point, a 5-year window, minimum 5 years, and then at that point, we do a retroactive allocation, dollar for dollar, 50 cents on the, whatever. So at least we know they're here 5 years. If they leave before 5 years, they defaulted,
The whole thing. Yeah.
period. If they stay 5 years, could they put the chain on the door the first day after the 5th year? Yeah, they could. But at that point in time, they get some credit, whether it's dollar for dollar or 10 cents on the, whatever it is, against this obligation. And at least we know we got them 5 years.
I personally like to see a little bit penalty from them leaving, no matter when they left. And the reason for that is we're gonna have a building down there, nobody in it. We're gonna have to be replacing people to get new jobs, new technology and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, if you make it from $1 million to $5 million, I don't know where that would be. But I'm for them create jobs as fast as they can, reducing it, but there still ought to be some kind of penalty at the end to help us reproduce, create more jobs with what we have to work with.
Did the original-
After 5 or 6 years, whenever our money runs out, you know, what I mean, we're not gonna have anything to try.
Did the original agreement with LifeSync, even before that blew, did they talk about some type of exit if they leave? There was some type of penalty? I'm trying to remember.
they had to remunerate us at.
$2 million.
There was a number.
Formula.
It
Yeah, it was a formula.
75.
No more than 75% of 1% of the gross of the company.
Oh, you could tie it to those, if they sell it, probably if they, and I'm just hypothecating here, if they move from here, they probably sold the company. So if they sell it for, then we'll pull your number, $150 million out of the sky. If there's a percentage, a small enough percentage to where it would still help us considerably, but in the big picture on a huge sale, it would not be a thorn in their side. You know, we would have money then to reinvest into some other company that could come in here.
I like that thing.
Scott, from a VC perspective, how does this impact your negotiations?
I think ultimately they want to know what the number is if the possibility exists the company moves. I mean, I don't know how to put it any simpler. So whatever that number ties to it, I mean, there's no guarantee. They're just going to want to know what the exit is. And it's not because they have an intent to exit. It's just part of their due diligence. They won't invest in something that has an open-ended agreement that they can't put a dollar to. Because they just can't put a figure to it.
Any VC I've ever known, and I've not known a lot, I've known a few, they always have an exit strategy. and they want to know at the end of X, it's Y. They're not in this for the long haul. They're not in this for the long haul.
Yeah, part of the difference, and we use VC kind of like Xerox or Kleenex, right? I mean, it's kind of a nomenclature. I don't know who ultimately ends up investing in the company, because I don't know, 5 years down the road. The firms that we're looking at now are buy and hold. They don't have funds that actually mandate, with a life expectancy of the fund to 5 to 7 years. It's one of the reasons we thought they were attractive. They actually work with the companies. Now, all I'm doing is telling you that. They can change it tomorrow. They haven't in their past. But you're right. The VC tends to try to get an exit.
Get in,
It may be
get
to
out.
sell it to another VC. It may be a management buyout. There's all sorts of ways where VC can take his money back. The two we're talking to, I don't think have that as a primary. They're looking for a good cash flow, good company in the space. But I don't know till I present it to them. I'll tell you, the longer it is, the more restrictive it is, the harder it is to sell to them, because they have other opportunities with less risk. And I don't know their formulas. I just know kind of the generalities. I'm all about trying to get something that's fair. I just don't want it to be so restrictive that they look at it and we'll have a litmus test, because I'm going to have to show it to them. The agreement that comes goes to two folks that we're talking to, because part of their participation is dependent upon what this comes out to be.
So maybe it could be a percentage with a maximum, like a 0.5%, maximum of 10 million, 8 million.
Or a maximum of whatever our investment was.
With a maximum, of 9.25 million.
Well, to me, we're being very fair because we're reducing
Absolutely.
their cost in the company, because we're the ones that's contributed this money,
Right.
so all they're really gone.
Is dollar for dollar at base level acceptable or not?
I'm fine with the
Well, you're-
200%.
You're talking
As long
about,
as it
But a
doesn't
minimum
happen
time.
for 5 years.
Yeah, and then even at 5 years, I'd like a minimum cost. Now, whatever that is, I don't know.
you're talking about two different things, though, is what I
Yes.
think I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike, Jim, your comment, and then Mike expanded on all the, sale is one thing. Donald's observation, well, put a max on it, max of our investment. Certain percentage of the gross sales price of the company, or the total IDA investment from day one, or 9.25 million, or whichever is lesser, right? I mean, or not to be less than the total IDA investment. However you guys want to do it, that's one issue. Because what I think I'm hearing is a consensus of the group that no matter what the time frame is, if it's sold, you feel one way. Because there's great potential for the jobs to go elsewhere. But I think when the devil's in the details, when you're trying to draft this stuff, you have to be careful, and I tried to do that. There's a difference between a sale of the company where they yank the jobs and a sale of the company where they just come in, assume operations, and the day-to-day worker never knows the difference. And from Hardy County's perspective, we don't know the difference.
I agree.
Just different owners, operators.
Yeah.
So you have to tie the movement of the jobs to the equation.
Yes.
That,
My opinion. Is that your,
So,
if the jobs stay here, then everything's
well, let's
fine.
take them one issue at a time. Let's talk about what it is you'd like to see specifically on the sale. You threw out an idea a minute ago, Donnie. An amount not to exceed the total IDA investment. You want to tie that to?
Is that a sale and move or a sale and stay?
I think we're talking. I don't think we do anything on a sale and stay. I think we're talking about a sale and move, personally.
That's what I'm talking
We're
about.
talking about moving the jobs. If there's
Now,
a sale
I'm
and they
assuming
don't
Mike's
move
doing
the
the same
jobs,
thing.
that's a different issue. But we can make it say whatever you guys want. But what I think I'm hearing is a consensus that you want a provision that deals specifically with a sale and a movement of the jobs, basically without credit of any kind for the job creation. It's just going to be a formula.
Sounds good to me.
Is that right? I mean, I'm trying to just read the
Say that again,
different
please.
comments. I think what I'm hearing, Mike, is a desire to deal with a provision separately that talks about sale of the company where the jobs are moved by some sort of set formula without any job creation credits. In other words, if it happened in year 15, Company's sold, the jobs are moved, we come up with a formula by which they are obligated, as part of their deal to sell, they're gonna include this in their contract, their buyer knows they're gonna have to pay the IDA as part of what their purchase obligation is.
Yeah, and I think we go even back to the beginning with that, because yet for us, they wouldn't be here. If they hadn't got our $7.25 million, this would not have happened here. This would not have happened here. So at the end of the day, if in fact the exit strategy is to build up a great company, and a lot of people do it, and that's the American entrepreneurial spirit, and that's cool. But at the end of the day, if they sell it for, we'll just pull a number out of the sky, $100 million, and they leave here, we should be able to recapture what we helped them start to get them to the point that they could sell it for $100 million.
Okay, so do you craft something that says the IDA, they're obligated to pay the IDA? I'm throwing out ideas out here because the devil's always in the details. The lesser of 10% of the gross sale price or the IDA's total investment. You know, I mean, you start thinking about things like a $50 million purchase price. 10% would be $5 million. You'd only be recovering a little more than half your money, but you know, if it's 100 million, it's a different beast altogether. The maximum you would recover would be 9 1/4, because 10% would be 10 million. It would be more than the total.
Can we pause for a moment, because I'd like to know the status of this line in the contract, because I think it may still be valid unless we change it. This is in the event of sale. In the event that LifeSync, this goes all the way back to the original LifeSync Technologies. In the event that it is sold, it agrees that the terms of sale shall require the acquiring party to remunerate the Hardy County Industrial Development Authority in the following manner. To the IDA, the greater of 1% of the stated gross purchase price, not to exceed 2 times the amount invested by the IDA into LifeSync Technologies, or 75% of the amount of money invested by the IDA into LifeSync Technologies. In other words, at a minimum, we would be remunerated at 75%. But if they sold the company for a lot of money, the formula would not allow us, or not obligate them to pay us more than twice our investment. I'm not certain that that's still not a bad clause to continue with to solve some of this problem. And it does exist in the existing contract because it's been carried forward.
Explain the 75% again.
There's no less than 75.
If they do what, no less than 75%?
Well, 75% of the 9.2.
If they sell,
If they sell,
let me go back and read it to the IDA, the greater of 1%.
The stated gross purchase price.
Yeah, $100 million, 1% is 1 million.
Right.
Here.
You gotta do it.
Right at 7 million.
Right that way.
Just shy of 7 million.
we cannot get
Okay.
less like that.
We read it to you again. In the event that LifeSync Technologies is sold, it agrees the terms of sale shall require the acquiring party to remunerate the Hardy County Industrial Development Authority in the following manner. To the IDA, the greater of 1% of the stated gross purchase price, not to exceed twice the amount invested by the IDA. It puts a cap on how much they have to pay us.
No, the other way.
Or 75% of the amount of money invested by the IDA into LifeSync Technologies.
So what's that doing, putting a minimum on it?
Yes.
But 1% of $100 million is only $1 million.
That's right. Or
The greater.
It says the
greater.
the
But it was
greater.
in no event no less than 75% of the money that was
So what is
invested.
75% of 9.2 million? Some of you math geniuses.
Close to 7 million.
It's 6.9.
6.9.
You'd have to clean it up and change LifeSync to Continuum at all.
But the language still works.
And it also says that it would continue level of operations at the date of sale within Hardy County for not less than 3 years from the date of the IDA's last investment. Those were the original words in the contract that was.
Change 3 to 5.
That's not long enough.
3 to 5.
Still what we agreed to as a board.
Yeah, but this is a new agreement.
Has anyone considered the possibility, Travis Bond has several companies. Some are successful, some are not. Has anyone considered, what if it does not sell and the stock goes to 10 cents on the dollar?
We lose.
We got a promissory note that's worthless.
You mean
At this point.
you can't go bankrupt on a particular company when you have other successful ones? Aren't they?
Well, it's personal
protected?
promissory note.
It's personal.
Well,
Depends on his personal.
my question is, has anyone considered that, everyone's saying 100 million, 150 million? What if it doesn't sell at all because of the product?
Then it fails.
Then it would just have
We took a risk and it didn't work.
And time is money.
That's for sure.
Well, we should have some language in there that can, if they're successful, and we certainly hope they are. I know I do. But that if, now, and what Bill just read, if they set out and stay here, they would still have to pay that. And I don't think if they sell it and stay here, that we should, make them pay anything, as long as they keep those jobs here.
It'd have to be a time limit on that.
There have to be a time limit. 3 years is not enough.
You'd want to transfer that obligation to the next company that ensued, if they followed them. I mean, you would try to negotiate where we
Yes,
just
you
remain
would.
in a position of.
For certain many years anyway.
To stay here.
But 3 years from the last investment, that's not very long.
If we did something like, dollar for dollar, and the multiplier does not kick in until year 5. It's still there, but it can't be applied until year 5. Is that a possibility? Are we just need some direction so we can craft.
But are we going to include, but if it sells?
Yeah.
But if it sells, then this other formula, whatever we come up with, kicks in?
I think they're separate, personally. I mean, I think the sale is something, what I think I'm hearing is a sale is something with a formula that really doesn't involve a multiplier. Am I right? I mean, y'all tell me.
The original live sync, ooh, wow, that got hot quick. Ooh. Hello, Maybelline. But the original live sync contract speaks to if it sells. I don't know that they are separate, Ken, but yet they're tied at the hip. If they stay, if we give them dollar for dollar, and they create 150 jobs, and in a couple of years, they don't know what's a penny. And if we don't have a time limit on it, and they sell and walk, then we get nothing.
Okay, well,
There's got to be some
we can
tie
tie them
together.
together. I'm saying that they can be separate. You can have a provision that says, in the event the company is sold and the jobs move, X happens. In the event they stay here, over a certain minimum time frame, and the company's not sold, Continuum is still sitting there 10 years from now, operating with however many employees, that there is some sort of formula applied with the payroll and the multiplier, and that somewhere down the road, they all can take a deep breath and say, we don't, whether it's 15, whatever it is, we feel like the IDA obligation has been contractually satisfied, and they can, not have to worry about it.
All right, we've kicked on this thing a long time. We need to come up with something, and whether we finish this whole thing today or not, and I hope we do, we're going to have plenty of time to come back and look at this thing. I don't know that we're under massive pressure to have this thing for next meeting to come up to a vote or not, but we need to get this right. We need to get it right. We don't need to do it and then come back in a month and say, oh my gosh, we missed X, Y, or Z. So we need to do what we have to do to get it correct. And we've batted around 4 or 5 different scenarios here, and I'm sure there's some consensus amongst all of them maybe pulled together, but we need to start getting there, I think.
I'm not sure we could get there today, Jim. There's about 3 or 4 scenarios here. And I'm not sure we're gonna be able to do that.
Well, we might not. What we might need to do, Counselor, is you've heard the comments here, is put them down, get them to everybody to look at. I mean,
Three or four
my poor little
scenarios.
pea brain can get scrambled sometimes.
Yeah.
And let us look at them, and try to make some intelligent decision on which avenue to follow.
Let me ask you, because obviously this is time consuming to sit down and prepare. You talk about prepare 3 or 4 different scenarios, don't want to bring them all back. That's, I won't.
Weekends, you can go over the
I
weekend.
understand. If we could get guidance, I mean, there is a way, Jim, you're right. I mean, you can tie, and it's kind of what we did here. We tied the 7.1A and B together, where if there's a sale, and if there's a sale, there's an obligation to repay, but it's reduced by the formula in A, which nobody liked.
No.
I get it. Okay, so we can tweak that formula with Mike's suggestion over there. Maybe it goes to 0 and it's all the way at 150 is 100%. We scale it differently. But is there a desire to keep the sale provision separate from if there is I'll try to narrow it down to a couple of questions. If there is a sale 10 years or more down the road, 5 years or more, I kind of need some guidance on that. I guess I could leave that blank and it's still going to cause discussion. But if there is a sale that relocates the jobs outside of Hardee County, there's a repayment obligation. Do you want it tied to credits so that it's reduced based on how many jobs were created during the time leading up to the sale? Or do you want a standalone formula? We come up with something that's a standalone, if it sells and the jobs are moved, this is what happens, period. That answer to that question would help a lot.
If you have 100 jobs for 3 years or 5 years, and then they up and leave, are we better off today or better off then than we were today? Are we right in the same place, or are we worse off? I mean, now you've got 100. You got 100 people. You could have 100 people that have a dependent income that then goes away.
I'm going to tell you the way I personally feel about it, and you haven't asked. I'm probably a mistake for me to offer.
What do you think?
I mean, I feel like they're separate provisions. I live here, I pay taxes here, and I feel like if the company sold, relocated the job somewhere else, I don't think in a short time frame, I think these job multipliers you hear about are weighted heavy on the back end. It's in the late years that you see the return in a community for job creation. And so I feel completely differently about a sale where the jobs are relocated in a condition in the 7.1A where they're just here and they're operating, and at some point, where do we give them the relief of saying you've met your obligation under this grant agreement? It goes away. That's some sort of a job creation formula to retire the obligation. But a sale where the jobs are moved, I feel differently, personally.
No, I think I agree with that. That's where I was just coming to in my mind's eye. If we have a 5-year threshold, and we'll just throw that out there for chuckles. If we have a 5-year threshold and we say dollar for dollar, whatever it is, if you stay that long and you've created X jobs, you get a dollar for dollar credit against what you would owe the IDA, assuming you stay here. If you sell your company and move it somewhere else, the jobs goes with it, then you owe us X dollars, period. The only time you get the forgiveness, if you will, and I'll use that term broadly, the only time you get the forgiveness is if that company stays here and continues on operating, employing, doing whatever, then you don't owe us X dollars. But if you sell it, whatever.
Or if you sell it to a company who chooses to leave the jobs here, the same formula applies as if it
5 years, 8 years, 12 years, whatever, and those jobs leave here, then you got to pay us back from the sales proceeds X dollars, whatever that number is.
Is that a consensus type feeling?
No, that was just me talking.
Well, I'm looking at the rest of the board for like nods or something.
I'm gonna
to-
go back to what I said. I'm all for giving them credit when they have their jobs. I'm all for giving them credit for the jobs, but I'm not for giving them complete credit where they don't owe us anything. If they move or sell the company, we should get some money. I don't care if it comes from Continuum or the buyer. I'd like to have some money, whether it's, like I said, $2 to $5 million. I think we gotta be careful setting it too high, because that could be a problem in negotiating. But anybody that moves in here uses our building, uses this, and when they move, I would like to see each new contract kind of be in where we'd have a walkaway cost for each one of them, so we can have the money to reinvest in some other type of business.
I think that's what he said.
I think I've got enough of a feeling about how everybody feels about the sales, assuming everyone who's spoken that wants to speak. The formula on they're staying here or Continuum sells and the buyer stays here, leaves the jobs here. What I'm talking about is 7.1A, the chart. Is there a minimum time frame we can assign to that? Is there a consensus that you want some sort of minimum time frame in that section?
Yeah, I think so. I think it should be 7 years, 10 years, something like that.
Okay. Anybody else feeling there some sort of minimum time frame with a rescaling of this thing so the top number across from 150 jobs is 100%?
I think maybe 7 years may be too many. I think 5 would be okay, but I just don't think the scale ought to go above 100%. But there again, I still like putting the retroactive in there and still have the buyout clause, whereas if somebody does sell, then we still get.
We did put a provision in here, we haven't yet talked about, it's later in the agreement, that anywhere during the time frame where they had this obligation, they could buy it out. They could just cash if they're popping and doing well and the revenues are good, at any point they could buy out the obligation by paying the IDA, whatever that math indicated in that chart. So, a 5 to 7 year, there's nothing magic about 5 or 7, how about 6? 6-year obligation, I'm trying to get to the point where I can generate a document that's gonna have some level of consensus, so we're not.
Use one of those numbers, and again, I'm just speaking for me. You probably wish you hadn't got me in here today, up here as a temporary chair, but I can tell you that this is not something we're gonna vote on today anyway. You use 6 years, 5 years, whatever, and then when we come back to vote on it, but we gotta get the guts of this thing down right. The yearly thing to me, from 1 year to another is, unless it goes from 5 to 30, I mean, but we gotta get the guts right.
Okay, that begs the question. I can tell you that, for the most part, we have kind of, in a roundabout way, discussed the rest of section 7, because it talked about the 7.1B is the sale provision, so we've kind of been talking about that anyway. 7.23 or the public record section, grantee representations, where they're basically representing their duly formed and have the authority to do all this. Paragraph 8 is where the IDA's funding obligations, if they have met their thresholds, is dealt with. The rest of this stuff looks pretty much like it's all boilerplate. I mean, that's the stuff about attorney's fee provisions and modifications and venue and litigation and all that stuff. So we've really kind of, paragraph 7 is where the meat of this thing is, and we've been through that. And I don't know if it's really gonna do us much good to go through.
Did we, let me butt in, did we get a consensus? No. Did we talked about the obligations of the buyout that directly defers back to the original LifeSync contract. The 1%, no more than 2 times 1% of its sales price, or 75% of our total investment. I mean, we probably should give you some direction on that, because that was, we glanced off that 3 or 4 times, but never got back to that. What does the board think about that? 1%, remember, 1% of $100 million is $1 billion. And I know it's the lesser of, or the greater of. So if it's owed, 75% of 9.25 million is about $7 million, thereabouts. You know, is the board happy with getting that much back if in 10 years somebody buys and they move, or we got to give you some direction there.
You can scale it. I mean, if the sale occurs within 5 years, it's this. If it's within 6 to 10, it's this. And if it's greater than 10, it's this. I mean, we can do that as well. And when you're talking about the percentages, if the maximum recovery at some point in time is 75% under that original, well, it wasn't. It was 2 times the IDA investment or whatever.
That's if the 1% was no more than 2 times the IDA investment.
Okay. So if you're
That's
talking
$1 billion.
you can scale it, you know, to say if the sale occurred, you get the greater of 1% of the purchase price or 100% of the IDA investment. If it occurs within 6 years, 6 to 10, it's the greater of 1% or 75%. And then, you know, do it in 5-year increments and adjust the percentages for each time frame.
Well, if they buy it in a certain time frame and move, we should not get less than our investment. My opinion.
Okay, what is that initial time frame?
3 years?
5 years.
3 years, 5 years?
I would think if it's 5 years, again, if it's 5 years, if they move, sell, move, you know, exit stage left, that we should get all of our money back. Period. 5 to 10, you know, maybe it's 80%, 10 to 15. I don't, the sliding scale, because if we've had 150 jobs, and we'll just use those numbers, that's what we've been batting around. If we've had 150 jobs for 10 years, the ripple effect of that is way outweighed by what our investment was here. I mean, 3 years, no. 10 years, yeah.
Here's what I'll do, unless one of you or all of you tell me differently. I'll prepare something that has a sliding scale. 5 years, up to 5 years, it's 100%. Year 6 to 10, it's 75% of what you put in it. Anything over 10, you got to tell me where the threshold is that you don't expect repayment, because I will scale it down. I could say years 10 to 14. It's 50%, and anything beyond that is 0. Whatever you want. You just have to tell me what that is.
I personally think that's reasonable.
Yeah, because they stay here 14, 15 years, we've got way more money out of them than we put in it, in our community.
And quite honestly, the chances of them staying are pretty high. If they're here that long, unless the market changes, if they're still doing well, they'll be here.
I'd still like to have some money to put back into something else if they left. I don't care when they left. That's just me.
I just think you're gonna be limiting how much, you know, as far as venture capital and all, if we get up where it's $10 million, like that, it's gonna limit who.
Now we lost somebody again.
I'm afraid if we have, you know, the $9 million, it's gonna limit the people they can attract to buy.
That's only on a sale.
Even for
Right.
short term?
Well, they've already been here and had for a year or 2, you know, but if you talking 5 years, that's one thing. But I just don't think we should go up and get it to where we expect to get all our money back after 5 years, because we have.
What were the numbers you said? 100% for 5 years, 75%, 6 through 10, maybe 50%,
11 to 15.
11 to 15, and after that, at some point, I think y'all let them off the hook, personally.
Well, at 1 to 5 years, it at 100%.
We'll find out real quick, because whatever we come up with, and they present it to these investors, we'll find out real quick if that's all going to hunt.
And that will make a big difference in this.
And at some point in time, we might have to regroup. But until that time, what we're trying to here to do today, I think, is to come up with what would best fit us to protect the investment we've made in this company and the citizens of Hardy County at some point in the future, I think.
Well, what you said is correct about them, but how do we know they're bluffing? You know, how do you know they say, well, we're just gonna tell them we're not gonna do this, and this, let's say, just throw everything out the window? You know, that's what concerns me.
I guess we go up to the lady right up there by Lang's Auto Repair, who's got the palm reader, and we can go up there and ask her.
I'll pay the $10.
I went to see her.
Have you got something to work with?
I think I can generate something.
And what you're telling us, somebody, I know Bill must not like what we're talking about.
We can get some, it's gonna be pretty complicated.
If it's all right, then what you telling us is the rest of this stuff, and I read this yesterday, is the typical boilerplate contractual.
Section 7 is where the meat of this thing is, and that's where the debate has all occurred today.
That's what we've talked about.
The rest of it is primarily, there's one little section in 8 that talks about our obligation to fund once the certification has been there on the job creation and the external money. But the rest of it is pretty much boilerplate stuff, so I don't think it's worth today, since you're not voting on it or whatever, it's not worth going to at this point, because it's mainly just boilerplate stuff.
All right, why don't we charge you then with bringing this back to us at our next meeting in the form that we've discussed?
Next regular meeting, or?
Next regular meeting, don't you think?
We can have a special.
When is our next regular meeting?
April 8th?
As quickly as you could get it done, that you could get it disseminated, that we could go through and look. And again, we want to get this right. I mean, is there a reason to call a special meeting? Why not do it at the regular meeting?
I don't ask Scott.
Scott, you tell us.
I think it's going to depend on schedules and what type of investment decision they want to make. You're not going to have it string out forever.
Sure.
I think we told them that we thought we'd have an agreement in place by the next meeting. That was a target that was given to them 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, procedures that have to happen actually have it come to a vote where they've looked at it, and if there's had to be any type of, negotiation, I'll facilitate that with Kim best we can.
Well, yeah, I know this has kind of been a moving target, but again, I'm going to stand very firm on the fact that we've got to get this as right as we can. And I just can't personally be under pressure to do something quickly and then come back and say, oh my gosh, we missed that. It's just, I would never vote for that.
Well, I would think that these people that he's talking about, that they're trying to get the loan or money from, has been dealing with this for months. And we're not gonna, and they want us to make a decision in a month. They've been dealing with it 3 or 4, 5, 6 months, so then we should have as much time as we
pressed him
need.
for a decision.
But I don't think they don't even know what we're gonna give to them. That's the problem. They can't consider their position until we.
And that's true. I would ask this board to really take a good look at this promissory note, word for word, because I think it's useless.
Jim.
Mike?
Ken, if we get you something in the next week as far as, some ideas on this, kind of maybe help you and all, is that enough, quick enough, or do we need to have it to you before?
I mean, if we're talking about the next board meeting, which is April 8th, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, And we've committed in the past to try to get these things out to you, you know, the week before, since it's a long deal. We're talking April 1st, today's March 13th.
These 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's, if you guys take a week to generate ideas, I mean, I'm gonna take the discussion today and try to run with it.
Right, understand.
So, I'll consider certainly anything any of you email me.
What about,
Or,
what about the public emailing?
Do what?
Laugh, or are you gonna take it into consideration?
I'm not laughing.
I wasn't, I'm talking about you.
I was laughing.
I wasn't, sorry.
Because I'll have to admit, I seldom read his emails. Just being truthful.
He works at the direction of the voice, but not the public.
So, you know, I have no question that we can generate the next draft a week in advance of the next meeting. I don't have any problem making that commitment. And any of you want to email, Frank, you can email me whatever you want to email me.
I'm talking about serious, not no, serious.
I'll read serious emails, Frank, none of the
Try to keep
personal
all the
attacks.
slang at it. Hell, I can't.
So, anyway, any of you want to email me with suggestions, whatever, feel free to do it.
All right.
I'm just trying to come up with a document I think will be.
It's okay with everybody else. We will lay this to rest and move on. You'll get this out as quickly as possible to us. And whatever the law requires that we do with this draft that you're going to send us, that's what we will do. There'll be no back rooms meetings. There'll be no under-the-table meetings. There'll be no meetings in the dark. It will all be where we know what's going on and whatever the law requires that we do.
There is one other, maybe a logistical problem. However, the board reaches consensus, then that document needs to be taken to the investor group. And I'm not certain that we shouldn't try to, if we're gonna make a decision in April, we have to make a decision on what we want to present or our position in this circumstance prior to that. Otherwise, we reach an agreement in April and that gets negotiated through May. I mean, I don't think we can come up with a final agreement if we wait until the April meeting and finally decide what we want in the document. That's my only point.
Yeah, but we're gonna come right back to the same time constraints. If anyone here comes up with an idea and it has a vision tonight or tomorrow or whenever and wants to send it to Ken, and he says, all right, send me something the next 5 to 7 days or whatever, and then he's got to get this thing redone and get to us so that we can get it out to us in a week. We got 2 weeks to do that. That's it. We got 2 weeks to do it. So
We'll send out the next draft, and I will caution all of you to feel free to call me or come by to see me if you have comments about it, that if it's something I can incorporate without having to completely change the whole thing, we'll do that to the extent we can. But I think what Bill's saying is you may have a special meeting that chair needs to call to say, you know, let's take the document as is and let's hash through it, do what we did today and go back through it.
But I go back to my time constraint. Is that going to give you time? Or are you talking about having a special meeting 4 days before our regular meeting? I mean, what is the object there? If you can't have it between now and 3 weeks, then why?
Time, I'm open to suggestions for that. I mean, it is, we're talking about almost a complete rewrite of the one section in there. So time's going to be a crunch. I don't know that it makes any difference whether it's 3 or 4 days, Jim. I mean, if it was going to be to hold a special, you have advertising issues.
Yeah.
You have to get ads in by Tuesday to get them in the paper. And so the time constraints on calling a special meeting may make it impractical or impossible to do. But there's nothing that says I can't meet with any one of you individually, or, you know, you guys obviously can't discuss it. Don't comment to each other, call me again, don't ever reply and whatever, but if you have comments you want to share with me, each of you individually can do that. Once you see the draft, and we'll go from there. I mean, unless something changes, I understand your comment. I mean, it may be that if we're set for April 8, and when you take in advertising requirements, you may not even be able to have a special meeting between the time we generate the new and the next regularly scheduled meeting. You may not have time to advertise it, and
My only thought
it can happen.
was that we should consider continuing this meeting back to this place on April 1st, the week preceding April 8th. And we reach an agreement on April 1st, we have one final week to tweak it, and then we have the regular meeting on April 8th. That would be my only logic I could interject.
We can have a special meeting just on this, right?
Yes.
The only thing on the agenda.
Sure.
That's what we probably need to do then.
But we can continue this meeting till that time and date certain, if you want to do
What
that.
Bill is suggesting is you take the advertising variable out of it. If you continue during this meeting, which was advertised to a date and time certain, and you announce it here publicly when you're coming back and doing it, you don't have to advertise a second time if you announce it in the open meeting.
But you'd have time still. I know you're right.
Public comment.
I don't know, we just need to make sure the public knows. what
Would
we're
the
doing.
first give you enough time to Ken, get this thing changed even with other exterior
Well,
input? I mean, that's,
If we get it to you a week in advance of the first,
yeah.
and then each of you starts with some individual input, it's going to be a little bit of a moving target.
It will be, but if all we're gonna do on this special meeting is just this, which is basically what's consumed us today, and we got some other stuff to do, although it shouldn't be long, I think that would give us enough time if we do a continuance and just have this meeting at, the one on the first as continuation. Would that fit
I'm
with your
fine
schedule?
with it if that's what you guys want to do.
What's the consensus of the board?
Let's do it.
That's fine with me.
Let's have a
We're
motion.
going to continue to this place at 8:30 on the 1st.
For this.
What is that on?
Tuesday.
So Tuesday.
A Tuesday,
Tuesday.
Someone will give me a motion to that effect.
So moved.
So,
April 1st.
second.
That's April Fool's Day,
At
right?
8:30.
All right.
Don't come in here just dressed like a court jester either. All right, we have a motion made and seconded to continue till April 1st, a continuation of this meeting for this specific item only. Any other discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.